Okay, we're gonna get started. Um, it's a lot more people than I thought it was gonna be. I was sort of hoping they were gonna give me like a little room with like 6 chairs, but that's okay. Um, we're really excited to put this together when we saw that they were looking for presenters because Nitika and I had a chance last year to go and visit some of the liberal arts universities that were opening up in the last 10 years in India. And the majority of kids at my school are Indian kids. This is awful. So it's kind of nice to be able to tour some universities in India and see what they're doing. It's exciting. I don't really know where else I could live where I could see such a change happening so rapidly in what's offered here. I've been living, this is my 3rd year here I live in Mumbai, and a lot of my kids go overseas for university. So we're trying to change that conversation a little bit to talk about how they could stay here and still do liberal arts. I'm American. I'm raised in a place where liberal arts is the norm. Like, we have very few non-liberal arts universities. So it's kind of an interesting panel because I was raised somewhere where liberal arts, it's such a assumption that you're going to go to a liberal arts university that I think sometimes I have a hard time defining what it is, because it's just what university is for me. It's not, it's a synonym for it. And then Nitika, if you guys want to go ahead, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon. So yeah, like Tiffany said, for me it's a different perspective. I grew up here in India, and I've seen the change over the past 20 years. We had the rigid systems of arts, commerce or science only, and now liberal arts just gives just opens out a whole new world of opportunity and options to be able to put your own undergraduate together, and you don't have to be in a decisive position when you're done with the 12th grade. You can take more time by trying out the subjects that interest you. Yeah, so it's a good time to see the change.
Hi, I'll just stand so I can see all of you. Hi, I'm Meghra Krishnamurthy. I'm an associate professor of sociology at Shiv Nadar University. I'm an anthropologist. I work on markets and the state. And it's exciting for what you said, because I studied in Bombay, grew up in Bombay. But then I went and did my IB at the United World College in Wales, at Atlantic College. And then when I was exploring opportunities, realized I was very passionate about the social sciences and couldn't find the sorts of opportunities that I wanted in India. Right, we had even then some excellent colleges in Delhi, but I grew up from Bombay, so that wasn't in my sort of landscape. And when I went to Atlantic College, sort of started exploring things both in the US and the UK. I eventually ended up doing my undergraduate in social studies at Harvard University. Now, Harvard, I've told them many times, please change it from social studies, because my parents were like, you've gone to Harvard to study social studies. So actually, it was social theory, politics, and development studies that I did as an undergraduate. I then did an MPhil in Cambridge in social anthropology, and returned to India and worked for several years in the field of health on the ground. I did my PhD from University College London in the UK, and a postdoc at the University of Pennsylvania. Around the time I was finishing, so this is 2012, 2013, Shiv Nadar University, Ashoka University, a number of universities were being set up in India. And it's an extraordinarily exciting time for people like me who have gone abroad, studied at these wonderful universities, done all our field work in places like Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, where I do my work, to have a chance to really build departments and to build universities in India, to really think about what the liberal arts is here and can be here. And I think it's not about, and we can talk more about this later, but it's not about importing the United States to India. Right? For me, this was very clear. I wasn't coming back to bring the liberal arts to India on some mission. It was already here. I learned more liberal arts working in a mandi in Madhya Pradesh, where traders and farmers taught me how to think about economics and politics and sociology in the same place and the same site, as much as I did at Harvard. Right? So for me, it wasn't about thinking about, about bringing that education here. It's about what does it mean to be, as you said, sort of an educated individual, right? And what does education in that broader sense really mean? And how can we build these universities here? Particularly because in India, and many of you know this, we've had this tradition where we've separated teaching from research, right? Traditionally, research has actually been done either at research centers or high universities, or, and teaching, especially at the undergraduate level. It's done in colleges, where a lot of the faculty don't have time to do research. So a lot of them, you have to make the sharp decision between, are you a teacher or are you a researcher, are you a scholar? And that was something we didn't have to do in the US or in the UK, where all of our teachers were also active researchers. So that was what really attracted me to places like SNU, where we're trying to build universities where you do both research and teaching, where you go all the way from undergrad to PhD, and you build that sort of environment. And it's been an extraordinarily exciting time. I think there are so many of these wonderful initiatives, and it's great to talk to all of you and hopefully have a discussion about how we can support these sorts of developments here. Thank you. Presentation, which Tiffany will make, and then after that we'll have a discussion.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously I'm not from India. Just thought I'd put that out there because I know that's what you're thinking. But I've been here, like I said, this is my 3rd year, and so I'm trying to sort of piece together how this evolution has happened. So if I'm wrong, just kind of sort of shake your head and I'll just try not to say it. Okay. So the way I understand it is that in the past, the sort of more traditional Indian universities were very professional degrees, right? So you went and you studied engineering. And as long as you knew that you wanted to be an engineer, that was great because you started right from the beginning to study that. You didn't get to study lots of other things, you studied that. And I can see that there's some real strengths to doing it that way. I can see that for some kids, they don't want to go and do an art class if they want to be an engineer. Or they don't want to waste time on a history class, I'm a history person too, if they want to do medicine. I understand that, right? That's a lot of systems around the world are set up that way. You know what you want to study, and so that's what you study. And you specialized in one field. The thing is that India's a pretty big country. It has a huge economy. I think I read it's the 5th biggest economy in the world, which is amazing. And so things are changing because we have this huge demand, right? I mean, we're trying to think of what the future is going to need here in India. And maybe it isn't someone who only knows engineering or someone who only knows medicine. Maybe the future is something where people could think of something that doesn't exist yet, right? A solution to a problem, and the solution doesn't exist yet. Someone who's going to be able to think outside the box and to pull from lots of different places, not just the one thing that they studied, but lots of different things that they studied. And I think that's the strength, not that it's better than a traditional way of doing things, but it's just a different way of doing things. I'm finding, and I'm sure if you're a school counselor, that a lot more of my job in the last 2 or 3 years is talking to students and parents about careers. It's not so much, and I'm really surprised about that. It's not so much just the process of applying to universities anymore, which I think 5 or 10 years ago, that's what most of my job was. But now people want to talk about what careers are going to be available in the future. And more of the stuff that we're doing can be done by robots, right? And so maybe 10 years ago, if a kid came in to me and said, I want to do something creative, the parents kind of freaked. Like, where's the money in that? What are you going to do with that? Which was history too, by the way, for my parents. And now, creative is actually what we're looking for. Those are the things that can't be replaced by robots. So I find that my parents, the parents of my students, are actually getting more comfortable with some of the more creative, thinking outside the box, combining economics and French in a degree. Whereas before, maybe they would have kind of sort of shaked their head at that. Anything you guys, you have to, okay, the other thing you have to know about me is I will talk as long as you let me. So if you guys want, you gotta chime in, because you give me this little microphone and I'm gone. Then I thought we would talk just a little bit about what it looks like. So the thing about liberal arts is that it's very flexible. You can pick and choose from lots of different areas of study. If you know what you want to study, well then when you pick your electives, you can kind of keep that in mind. So I knew from the beginning that I wanted to study history. So when they made me take an art class, I took art history. You don't want to see me paint, sculpture, like it's not pretty. So I studied other people who did that. When I had to take a computer class, the computer class that I took was plugging data in about like the Salem witch trials that happened in the U.S. and trying to figure out why that happened based on plotting where the accusers lived and where the accused lived. And so you could see very clearly using this computer that these people were accusing these people, right? It was, these people lived on one side of the river and then these other people lived on the other. Yeah. So you can tailor it so that it's sort of connected to what you want to study, or you can just choose something totally different. At the university that I attended, you had to take PE classes, I think 4 PE classes. And so I took, I don't remember what the real name of it was, but we called it camping for credit. Like, so you went camping, that was your PE. They took us to the mall and we looked at hiking boots and yeah, we went shopping pretty much, let's be honest. The thing I really liked about the liberal arts programs that I know is it's a lot, by the time you get up into your major, which are normally the 3rd and the 4th year in the US, the classes get really small. And so they're Socratic, there may be 8, 10, 15, 20 people in the class. You're expected to participate, you know, it's not these huge lectures. In the beginning, you know, in the first 2 years they might be, but by the time you get into the major courses, they're very small and intimate, and you know your professors on a really close level. I liked that it was interdisciplinary, so you had to do some humanities, some natural sciences, some formal sciences. Some of the examples that I looked at were like UT Austin, where you have to take English Lit, an intermediate world language, because they want you to be able to speak other languages, which we don't really do very well in the States, I don't think. Especially living in India, where everybody speaks like 8 languages. We're not very good at this. 2 natural sciences, math, a class on cultural expression, human experience, and thought. The university that I went to, which was Mount Holyoke, it's a women's college in Massachusetts, 68 of the 128 credits, so over half, have to be outside your major. So you're not allowed to just study engineering or business. Over half of your degree has to be outside your major. And that's what they look for. I think it's really good for kids that are confused about what they want to be when they grow up, because you get a year or 2 to explore, which I think for a lot of 18-year-olds is really good. I also think it's really good for kids who like to do lots of different things. I mean, I knew what I wanted to study, but I still enjoyed doing history and math and computers. Like, I didn't only want to study one thing. And I think in India, as more and more IB schools open up, we're getting more kids that are like that. You know, they don't want to go to a traditional math, science-focused high school, and so they also don't want that in college either.
Maybe I'll just sort of come in
Sure,
very
yeah,
briefly.
got it.
So, you know, one of the things about coming up with liberal arts universities in India, and this is true, I know, for SNU, for Ashoka, for a number of us, is that we realized it wouldn't work to have people come in without majors. you try and get Indian students or parents to say, I'm just going to university and I don't actually know which stream I'm going to be in at all. We tried. We said, okay, you can come in undecided, right? And a couple will have a better reading here, but like I think there was like 1% undecided, or even not even 1%, right? Everybody wanted to pick a stream, right? They didn't want to come in without any sense. And for parents particularly, this idea that you were going and you didn't know what you were going to do was very precarious. Secondly, at SNU, we actually pick our majors at the end of the, you come in, but then you have the first year to think about it. So a lot of students do switch at the end of their first year, and some even switch into their second year because the syllabus allows you to do that, right? So, you know, one of our students joined engineering, switched to English, then did a minor in sociology. So he did English and sociology, and he is now going to do actually graduate studies in, in social anthropology at Cambridge. So he's picking, he found his way. So a lot of, students come into, so same with economics and sociology, or they come into sociology and then realize they're historians. So, that kind of shifting happens, but we do allow students and parents in that. Initially, it's a lot of the parents, allow them to pick a major as they enter, right? And then we've designed the degrees around that. The second thing, but it has a lot of electives and a lot of sort of other things, as you mentioned. The second really important thing, and I think this is particularly important in India, where people think the liberal arts are the social sciences. Right? When you say liberal arts, you assume English, history, sociology, arts, economics, it's the social sciences. But I think it's extremely important to understand that the liberal arts includes science in a very big way. So science, math is critical to it, because social science students cannot leave a liberal arts university without doing science and math. They have to do it. Right? And I can certainly say as a sociologist, I think it's immensely important for us to be able to read statistics, understand statistics, be able to have conversations about the economy and about economics, and to be able to understand basic science. I'm teaching a course called the Anthropology of Water, and we're doing an MSc program in water science policy. Try and teach the anthropology of water without looking at hydrogeology. You can't do it. You can't study climate change without going back to physics. So all these kids who thought they were studying sociology are now drawing hydrologic tables. We're also trying to understand historically, when did the hydrologic table actually come to be, right? And when did we start seeing water as this hydrological cycle? We're asking those questions, but unless you study science, you're not going to solve this problem. So in India, the science has always been there. I think even in the US, it's very important. What is different in India, and that's why I think it's very interesting for SNU, engineering is also part of the liberal arts, right? When I was an undergrad, our School of Engineering was actually pitching a class to the rest of the university, saying engineering as a liberal arts subject, right? It's trying to think why we as social scientists need to also engage with the logics and skills of engineering. Right, so there's a very interesting and important interaction, and I think in India, look, engineering education is the norm, and many of our brightest students select into engineering. So if we choose to ignore engineering and say, well, that's not the liberal arts, we're going to fail to engage a very large number of students who have a lot to offer, right, both ways. The third point I want to make is that, what you often said is that people think, this was particularly in India, that because we pick one thing, right? You study medicine, you study law, you study engineering, you study architecture, you study, social science, business, absolutely. So you study these big things from the beginning. That, this kind of thing, you'll pick up a lot of little stuff, but how are you actually going to pick up core skills? Right? Are you going to be taken seriously as an engineer out of these things? And for us, we take it very seriously that you have to have strong skills as a major. So you're saying repeatedly, I am a historian. I'm saying repeatedly, I'm a sociologist and a social anthropologist. That's because we have core disciplinary skills. We just have a much wider perspective on how to even think about our own skills. Now, this is critical because we don't want to produce people without skills. And I often say there's a very small, thin line between interdisciplinary work and indisciplined work, right? And most of the stuff that passes as interdisciplinary is indisciplined because people aren't coming from deep subject knowledge, right? And you can't do one without the other. So this is not a trade-off between, sort of the Brits always say, right? You know a lot about a little, or you can know a little about a lot. This was when I was in Cambridge, and they said, you guys know a little about a lot, but we know a lot about a little. And I said, well, that's not a very helpful way to think about this, right? You have to know a lot about something, and then you also have to be able to think about things, right? So, I mean, the undergraduate education is an education in how to learn. It's not an education in just being skilled, it's about how to learn, because you're going to have to learn your entire professional life, right? And so it's about teaching them those skills and then teaching them to think about whatever they're learning in a critical way, right? And so I think these are some important points when we're thinking about liberal arts in India, particularly, I think for parents, it becomes extremely important to say this. I have something to say about career as well, but we can come back to that.
No, I mean, that's a perfect segue to the next thing I wanted to talk about was I think it's very skill-centered, and I think that that's really important. I mean, if you Google liberal arts, inevitably it comes up the skills that you're going to learn. And I think now, with the internet and everything else, you don't need to memorize a bunch of statistics or data. You can Google it, and it's on your phone. What you need to know are the skills and what to do with those, right? I mean, now that I've got the facts, what am I going to do with it? And I think that's the part where liberal arts really sort of comes in. That's one of the big strengths for it. I think creative thinking skills are really important. I think looking at data and trying to interpret them is very important. Synthesizing new ideas from a bunch of things that you're looking at. Research skills, I mean, we had to do a ton of research, so the idea that liberal arts isn't research heavy is a myth. To pose meaningful questions, I think, because every liberal arts university that I know, you're not supposed to just sit there and listen to a lecture. I mean, yes, we had lectures, I'm not going to say that we don't, but the idea was that you would be questioning whoever it was up here. Please don't question me, I don't mean it like that. But you're supposed to be questioning the professor or whoever else is speaking, the other students as well. And I think that that's the part that is a real strength of it. And as the world is shrinking, I also think that in these exchange of ideas, you start understanding other cultures, which is another really big part of where we're heading. Employers are constantly talking about, how we need people who understand globally what's going on and other people's perspectives. So I talked about this. Adaptability, flexibility, I mean, these are all things, as I'm learning more and more about careers and the next step that our kids are taking, they need transferable skills that aren't just sort of honed in on one thing, but that they can apply in lots of different situations. Breadth of knowledge, which we talked about.
I'll just pop in.
Yeah, please. Yep.
On that. I mean, this is the thing about work. I mean, I completely agree about work because, so I grew up, my parents, my dad is a finance guy, and my mother is a doctor, and I went to study liberal arts, and I came back to India, I did social anthropology, came back, and I got a job. My first job was working in the social sector, but I worked on health in a bank. Right? ICICI Bank at that time had a very exciting social initiatives group, and it got students from across, all of us were graduates, some from rural management, some from D School in economics, some of us from, in anthropology, across the board, and they put us together to try and think seriously about health, education, and microfinance. And I ran the health team, and we sort of spent all of this time working with government. So most of my time working on health in a private sector bank was working with state governments, right, in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, in Delhi, and in Bombay, particularly looking at the BMC, right, on how to build stronger public health systems, right, private bank working on building stronger public health systems, working with some of the best NGOs in the country who had actually pioneered at a small scale things that then needed to get scaled up through large-scale systems, right? You're not talking about 100 villages when you're talking about Chhattisgarh, it's 60,000 villages, right? So how do you reach these services? What you're saying about adaptability and the liberal arts is this, right? Is that this is increasingly happening. And that was 10 years ago, right? So now you have to imagine how much that's changing, right? We are all working. I work routinely with the government of India. I work routinely with private sector companies. I work a lot on the ground with producer companies and with NGOs working grassroots up, right? We work with media. Right? We're constantly moving and trying to think about how to get our messages across and how to engage with public discourse. So this idea that you have one single way to do all of this, right? And so when parents come talk to me and say, what is the future? I'm like, it just depends on what you want to do, right? And what is important is that you have transferable skills, but that you develop deep passions. I think a big problem with a lot of the students that I see is that they're very interested in subjects. I'd really like to do public policy. And I'm like, okay, what do you think are the top 5 public policy issues in India? And then I get this blank. But public policy sounds great. So I'm like, people interested in public policy are either interested in power, in which case they should really go and be politicians, because that's where you really engage with power, or they're not particularly exciting. The people who I know who do great public policy are passionate about issues, right? They're passionate about disability rights, they're passionate about water, they're passionate about healthcare or building safer cities. And then they come into policy. And that's where you need all of it. You need the statistics, and you need the mathematics, and you need the writing skills, and you need to be able to imagine things, and you need design, right? And that's how they start pushing the frontiers. So I think we're also trying to build students who learn to find what they're passionate about, right? Like to actually make deep commitments. And that's the other problem with liberal arts, is we think what you absolutely said, which is that it's good for kids who are confused, but the whole point is to find your way out of that confusion, not to remain endlessly confused. I mean, I get a lot of, you deal with the school kids, at the college level, I get a lot of people saying, I think I'll do a gap year. And I'm like, you know what, like, never do a gap year when you don't know what you want to do. Do a gap year when you know what you want to do, right? Like the only time I took a gap year is to have a kid. I knew what I was doing that year. But like, I mean, do it when you know what you want to do, right? Because if you do it when you don't know what to do, you will bhatko-fai from place to place, you'll go from side to side, and you'll just be confused without any structure. I'm like, you don't know what you want to do? You don't know what you want to do? Take a job. Take any job. See if you like it. You'll learn something, and then you'll discover you don't like it, you'll take another thing and you'll learn. But you're not going to learn by trying to discover yourself in some vacuum. Right? So we aren't building vacuums. We're building corridors and rooms and doors and things that they can enter and exit and figure it out and move forward. Right? And that's, I think, the other big confusion, is that they're just going to get confused. They're going to come and they're going to look at all of this and they're going to get confused. Well, I mean, they're already confused. We're all much more confused than we've ever been. We're all endlessly trying to self-develop ourselves and feel terribly inadequate about our ability to cope with the world. They're no different, we're no different. But we have to have the tools to navigate this confusion, right? And that's, I think, what good higher education institutions, the liberal arts do, is try and deal with that confusion head on and give you the tools to try and navigate it. And you're going to face it in university, and you're certainly going to face it as you think about your career and the sorts of issues that you want to work on.
So when I first got here, I thought in order to do liberal arts, you had to leave, right? I mean, a lot of my kids, I think at 17, 18 years old, everywhere, developmentally, they just want to go somewhere. Like, if you're from the States, you live in New York, you want to go to California. And if you live in California, you want to go to New York. Like, it's very normal, I think, for kids to want to go somewhere and have an adventure. So a lot of my students, my school's mainly Indian, they just wanted to go. Like, they didn't even know where to go, they just wanted to get out of India. And I didn't really know to help them to explain that you could have that sort of experience here. So last year and the year before, as I've learned more and more about liberal arts here, it's kind of exciting for me. Not only is this all happening sort of right now, but the idea that kids could stay here and have a liberal arts education was pretty exciting. I mean, it was a really big deal. So then we visited some of the universities over the last 2 years, and this isn't an advertisement or anything like that, but I just thought you should see some of the examples of what's going on. It's not an exhaustive list. I'm not an expert on these universities. It's just, this is a counselor's perspective of what wowed us about the different programs. And I think the best way to show you what liberal arts is so that you can see how different universities are doing it. I know that there might be university reps that are here. If I get something wrong, please interject, because I'm doing the best I can. You want to talk about Bennett?
Yeah. So we were. Yeah. No, it's okay. So we were pleasantly surprised when we made this trip to New Delhi. We've not seen these kind of universities, this infrastructure before these universities have cropped up. It was interesting to see, especially at Bennett, the exchanges that they had in the corporate world. What should I say? Okay, I'm at a loss for words. You have it.
So Bennett is 2 years old, I believe. It's very young, and this is pretty much the entire campus right now. Like, there's tons of space and they're building, and the dorms might be ready now. But when we visited, it was really just 2 buildings. It's linked up with Times of India, so if you remember, like if you knew that Times of India opened up a university, this is it.
Yeah, so their concentration was on life skills, soft skills, communication, teamwork, critical thinking. These were a lot of the things we hadn't seen in rigid India before. We also visited Ashoka University. You've heard enough probably about Ashoka. World-class faculty, academic excellence. It was, again, a liberal arts college that you see anywhere else in the West. Though, yes, we're not trying to bring the US here, but it's nice to see such a good option close to home.
So Flame is in Pune, so down by Mumbai, and this was actually the first liberal arts university that I visited here. In Mumbai, we don't have like a lot of space. So the campuses aren't sort of the traditional campuses that you think of. They're either a building or a floor in a building or maybe a couple buildings. But this was absolutely amazing to see. I think I'm done doing it. Because they had a very sort of traditional campus. It's right outside of Pune, so you go there and you can focus on being a student. Right? You're not getting drawn into everything else that's going on. Like, you're there for your 3 or 4 years just to be a student, which I think is kind of luxurious. You know, it's a really beautiful thing. The other thing that I liked is there's a golf course right next door. I don't play, but it's nice to look at. They have a 3-year program. 10% of which is open elective courses, so you can take anything that you want. 30% is foundation courses, so you have to take 2 humanities classes, 2 social sciences classes, 2 art sciences, and then 55% of the courses that you take are in your major. So you're still doing a ton of things based on what you want to study. The other thing I liked is that one of the courses that you have to take is called Discover India. So you have to go out and learn about your own country, which I think is very cool. Like, I like that. You know, we do that sometimes in the US, where you get to go to an area that you don't know about the US. And I think it's great to do global things, but I also think it's really good for Indian kids to learn about their own country. You know, Mumbaikers love Mumbai. Don't ask them about Delhi. Sorry. Don't ask them about Delhi. But I think it's great for them to learn. Like, you know, we take our kids in 6th grade up to Ranthambore to hunt, you know, try to find the tigers, which hit or miss. And getting them up there and getting them to see a different part of India is gorgeous. You know, they get to be so proud of their own country. And so I like that as Flame does this, they're doing something that's making Indian kids proud of India. Like, that's just fantastic. It's a fully residential program, which I think is another thing. These universities that we're talking about are all fully residential programs, which I think is really important for 18-year-olds. to get away from home and to make some mistakes and to learn how to do laundry, like I think that's really, really good. And in the U.S., it's the same thing. I mean, there's not all high school kids in the U.S. do their own laundry. Like it's like let's get away from that. But they learn how to do it, or they wear dirty clothes in college. Like that's where you do it. And it's embarrassing enough that you're doing it at 18, but it's really embarrassing if you're not learning how to do laundry until you're 23. Like that's just pathetic. So I like that they get to these universities that we visited, and this one in particular. It's a beautiful campus. It's quiet, which Mumbai we don't get quiet very much. So I liked that. They also do a mandatory sports program, which I think is very cool. I mean, India is a very sports-driven country anyway, but I liked that it was kind of a requirement. Community service, internships. It is a 3-year program, but you can opt to stay for a 4th year, and a lot of the kids do stay. Like they want the 4th year.
Which is what I wanted to say. I think that is one of the biggest advantages we've seen with the liberal arts colleges, that they offer 4-year undergraduate programs. This is something that was really missing in India, and it makes students eligible to do a master's program anywhere in the world.
So this one I think is in Gujarat. Yeah? Okay, good. Yay, okay. This is a 4-year liberal arts program, so if there's not an optional 4-year, you have to do 4 years, and there's not a lot that are mandatory 4 years. So it's just like the US, where the first 2 years you get to explore, and then the second 2 years you kind of focus on your major and your minor. You have to complete an undergrad dissertation, which I think is kind of a research paper. And the cool thing about this university, I don't know if they're going to be happy that I say this, but you choose what you want to write your dissertation on, and they help fund it. So kids choose to write their dissertation on flamenco dancing, and then the university pays for them to go to Spain and study and research. So if you keep in mind that you're going to get this trip out of it, you could pick some really neat dissertation topics because they're going to fund it for you. So I thought that was pretty neat. They pointed it out, so I think it's okay that I say that. They also have to do a rural-urban internship, so I like that, because a lot of my kids don't really get out into rural India very often. There's a voluntary corporate internship and an international exposure program. And the other thing I liked about this one is that in their mission statement, they just talk about how they're trying to make better human beings. And I just think that's such a nice way to put that. Like that's pretty cool.
Okay, O.P. Jindal. So we're right here. We did meet a lot of the faculty which has been educated overseas, and they had excellent sporting facilities. They were doing they were having sporting competitions between all the universities, the way the Ivy League colleges do. So there was a lot of inter-collegiate sports. They're especially popular for their law program, but they're offering all the others like business, government, public policy, liberal arts, journalism, communication. We met very happy students who had left different cities in India to be a part of O.P. Jindal. They had a great campus. This one had a very impressive campus.
And they had a moot court.
Yeah.
So you can go and do so yeah, they have a moot court. So if you go through the law program, you can go and practice your court skills. And it's sort of a room about this size, and it's quite intimidating at first, to sort of stand up there, and you have a judge that's interrupting you constantly and asking you, can you clarify that, and what about this, and so that I thought that was pretty neat. I haven't seen a lot of those facilities, so I thought that was a neat experience for kids to actually get to experience the law before.
You guys talk about it. I'll come in.
No, it's nerve-wracking enough to do this with a room full of Indians. I don't want to talk about your university on top of it. I'm terrified up here, I'm gonna say the wrong thing. Okay, so Shiv Nadar is a 286-acre campus, state-of-the-art engineering and technological facilities. A lot of the students go directly into PhD programs in the U.S. They have a lot of faculty that's been educated overseas. They have a pretty active and happy student body. When we visited, I have to say that I was floored by the students at Shiv Nadar. Because we met with them as well as faculty together, and listening to them finish each other's sentences, and it was just a very comfortable sort of place, and you felt like students were on par with the professors and that everybody was learning from each other. The other really big thing, and you know, these are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, right? I mean, this is the first time they're away from home. They're gonna make some mistakes, and that's everywhere. And that's kids that are going away for university, and it's also kids that stay at home and attend classes for university. Like, just because you don't let your kid go away to school doesn't mean they're not gonna make the same mistakes that kids that go away to school do. Like, there's gonna be exploration and, you know, drugs and alcohol. Like, even kids who live at home, developmentally, that's where they're at. They've gotta make these mistakes. And the thing that most impressed me about Shiv Nadar was that they were dealing with them head on. They weren't hiding them, they weren't denying them. They were trying to figure out what best policies were gonna help the kids. I don't think they have a curfew, which was unlike the other Indian universities. So they really do treat their students like adults. And I really appreciated the feel of the university, because I just felt like everybody was working together to try to make this the best place that you could. And I don't know what else you could really want, honestly.
Those are great observations. I'll just tell you a little bit about the academics. So we have, as you sort of mentioned, sort of engineering. We have a very exciting school of natural sciences. One of the things I'm very proud of is our vice chancellor is a woman physicist. Right? This is so important. Like, this is rare anywhere in the world. To have women scientists run the university is very exciting. And she's a tremendous scientist and a wonderful student. She built a school of natural sciences before becoming the VCA. So we have the School of Natural Sciences, the School of Social Sciences and Humanities, where I am, but we also have art, design, and performing arts. We have School of Management and Entrepreneurship, which has come up, and in the works, so there are 4 active schools which are currently running, and the plan is also now, like others think about law, and think about education and other things. We have a number of centers also, research centers, so we have the Center for Public Affairs and Critical Theory. A lot of these universities actually have great centers. Most important, I think, for us, and what I just mentioned to you, was that we built research into the curriculum. So the idea, what you said about treating students at 18, like they are original thinkers, right? They're already researchers, right? They come in and they have research ideas. So research is built into every aspect of the curriculum across the disciplines, right? Whether you're in engineering and you work in labs, or you're in humanities and social sciences, all our students also have to write senior theses, and they do original analysis. So sociology, for example, they do original field work for this. Part of this commitment to research is that we also have masters and PhD students, and the PhD students are TAs in our classes, they run the tutorials, so they get to see what careers in academia and research are like, and it's a great experience for the PhD students to actually work with and get teaching experience hands-on. And finally, we have something called the Opportunities for Undergraduate Research, which is like, you sort of mentioned that they fund. It's a grant-based thing, so students apply with faculty mentor who does not need to be from their department. So I work with engineering students, others in English, I work with students from history, mix and match. You find a faculty member and a topic you're really interested in, and the university supports 1 year of research that you do alongside, and it's called, it's OUR, Opportunities for Undergraduate Research, and that's produced some really exciting, some of these have already published papers, right? We've all been blown away because we didn't expect these guys to be that, books. But at the undergraduate level, they're publishing in really good journals. Some of them are co-authoring with the faculty member. So the ideas are already, so when you mentioned that they're doing PhDs right after, some of this is starting at the undergraduate level. They're realizing that they have research instincts, right? They're moved back in research training. So a lot of that is, some of the things that we've been doing to try and get research to be something that undergrads involved as intrinsic to their education.
I think the other thing I saw was that about 85% of the undergrads receive aid, and there's a earn while you learn sort of thing. So a lot of the kids have jobs on campus, like 286 jobs available on campus, which I think for my kids, I don't know what your kid, but a lot of kids in the U.S. have jobs after school or on the weekends, and our kids don't. And I think that they're at a disadvantage because of that. So I think there's something to be said about having to show up on time, dressed appropriately, finishing tasks that are asked of you, those kind of life skills. And so I like the fact that there's a lot of kids that have on-campus jobs.
And I think this will be true of Jindal, Ashoka. I know it's true of Jindal, Ashoka, and SMU, but we have students from over 28 states, right? And the languages, so you have students from North, South, Kashmir, from other, and so that's been wonderful, right? The diversity has been great, and the university has a very strong financial aid policy, right? Which is really based, across the disciplines. This is again incredibly important. We were talking about this. If we don't have institutions where you see economic and social diversity, in India we are not going to be able to build this country and deal with its social and political issues. Right? In college, you have to see people as equals from a whole range of experiences. And the university has been very clear, and that was important for me coming in to see students come from diverse backgrounds, both culturally, socially, and economically, to the university.
I also wanted to say I like that part of your core is Indian history. Like that's a course that they have to take because I think that that's really important. I mean, if you're in the U.S., you would have to take a U.S. history course or whatever. So I like when I see universities that are doing, like learning about your own country. And MIMS is what you know more about than I do.
So they have their own entrance exam, which you could take, on 2 days of the weekend. They're offering similar courses like all the other liberal arts colleges. They've started their own architecture program. They don't have a campus like the ones that you see in Delhi. They have a few buildings on the same street. But they are, growing. They're growing with the majors that they're offering. They're growing with the facilities. They have exchange programs overseas with universities internationally, and they've started a design program as well recently, which is going to be taught by the faculty from NID in Ahmedabad.
And then the last one we thought we would talk about was Symbiosis, which again is up in Pune. I think it was one of the first liberal arts programs here in India. They offer 13 different majors, 7 minors, computer fundamentals, environmental awareness. You get to take 8 different electives like film or Greek philosophy or haiku poetry or music, which I think is pretty cool. And they allow a lot of sort of unique combinations, like something with math and anthropology, so you can do something totally different. I know we're running out of time, sorry. I don't know where we have 5 minutes here, she's yelling at me. I think we sort of talked about this a little bit, but it's really cool to be able to stay in India and study liberal arts. I think finding yourself in your own country can be really sort of, it's a great experience to have. You don't have to go to another country in order to do this. It's a lot cheaper if you stay in India, which is a concern of my parents. I mean, the U.S. is astronomical. You get the same sort of international education. They have residential campuses. The timeline, depending on the university, could be the same as the U.S. or a little bit later, depending on which university you're looking at. So it offers a little bit of flexibility. The faculty are either international faculty or they were educated internationally, or they're from the top universities here in India. There are study abroad opportunities, internships, all that kind of stuff. And you're also close to home, which I find for some of my kids is it's a compromise, between them and their parents. where, they want to go to the US or the UK or Canada, and the parents aren't really ready to let go yet. And so they can still go and have that sort of residential campus liberal arts experience without having to go so far. Application process, I think, is pretty common. A lot of them have entrance exams, or you can take the SAT. A lot of them have interviews, so it's not just based on a number. It's based on how you did on the exam, plus the personal interview. If you look at somewhere like Flame, they also actually have a group discussion, so they bring you in almost for a mock class and to see how you handle yourself with other kids. Yeah, and that's it. Told you I could talk the whole time. Yeah. Very sweet, thank you. That's exactly what I want to hear. I won't, but yeah.
Just share something with you, and this is just to add what you were saying. I come from Pathways World School, and we've been sending students to almost all of them, and we've come to a stage where we're getting feedback from the students. And to be honest with you, there's not one of the university here from where the students have come back and said that they are sorry that they have joined it. They're all extremely happy. And the points that I want to really make very clear here is that these are very competitive schools. Students do find the academic rigor that they probably thought was not existing in this country. In addition to that, they get time to connect with their own students who've gone overseas, and in no way do they feel that they have missed out on anything. In fact, some of them feel that they have actually, they're almost on par if not better. Because of course being at home kind of gives them that little comfort which some of the students take almost 6 months to adjust when they leave overseas. So they're kind of earned on that. Job-wise, they are not at all in any disadvantage. In addition to that, when now the things are going better, and I don't know if this kind of makes any sense, some of the schools have now getting more and more applications, and when the rejection comes, I'm beginning to feel that elevation of the student mindset in terms of the universities going up high. I mean, I can say some of my students were rejected in one of these universities, and suddenly there was a step back that, oh, that means something good is happening somewhere. So I can at least tell you that I am extremely, and I'm so glad you brought this up, Tiffany. And please, I mean, one more thing I can add, that all of them are very, very counselor friendly, student friendly. You can take your group of students there. Some of the universities are willing to host them overnight. I've done them personally. I always do it annually, and it helps. Thank you so much.
Sure.
No, that's okay, but there are still parents who are willing to spend money, but there's a question of money. It's the education experience, which people always have in mind, right? Is it as good or is it as...
I think the finance is important, but I think the thing is about going abroad for the right reason. Right? I mean, I'm so glad I studied abroad, and it's been wonderful. And I think if you were like me, I was really passionate about global issues. I spent all my time growing up in Bombay, reading about Rwanda, and I was exercising about what was happening in Bosnia at the time. So I should, if I was passionate about it, I should go abroad. Right? I went abroad, and as you said about discovering, I realized what I was really interested in was local issues. Right? So then I spent the rest of my time using stuff around stuff. But the thing is, I went for the right reason. Right? You need to go because you want to, like you said, if you want to explore the world, and you're passionate about a certain subject, which is the best, in China or in East Asia or in the United States, by all means, find the right people. But we shouldn't have them to go because we can't do it here. Right? And I think a lot of us are committed to coming back and building these institutions here so that you have choice. I think it's incredibly important to have exchange. So, you mentioned about the exchange programs. One of our students, one of my students went off economics and sociology, and she went to China and she spent time with Duke in China. And it was a wonderful experience for her. Right? She came back with a completely different perspective. She started learning the language, she started getting interested in all of this. I mean, that's one of the things you're right. And we all we speak multiple languages, but we need to study multiple languages, right? Like we need to take language seriously. And so this was the kind of things that I find really exciting. But one fly, I don't need to say much more. But I mean, I think the best feedback is going to be from the students. Right? It's going to be whether they have that experience, no matter how we decide.
Just want to add one more thing, was that they have an excellent, at least Ashoka Interview, I know they have an excellent summer program, which my students have done, and they've given excellent feedback, which has helped them to understand what the level of education is. What's the kind of support they provide to students with special needs?
It's a university.
It's university specific.
We're going to get back to the university.
But we work very hard with every, and I was telling them, so there are three things. One is disabilities who come in, and so we made sure all the construction allows for them to access, and so it's all disability friendly. All of our universities are doing this now, which is very exciting. And maybe we're not exciting, it's just true. It's just how it should be. The second thing is that I think for each student, right, if they have special needs in terms of, I have a student who has been dyslexic for a long time, came to me in class, we'll work it out, right, whether they need more time, some of the assignments. In fact, universities are much better at dealing with those things than schools because it's not like a simple exam system. There are students who are also open school. Yeah, so I mean, like
universities and on training which is about and that aspect of you're from there, so you're not eligible for a university.
yeah, no, I think we find ways. I think we all have admissions processes and different universities have different admissions processes. But the idea is to actually be as open as possible, right? And then once they come in, but I think the point you mentioned is important, that they are competitive. And it is very hard. I mean, I've had friends, kids who applied and haven't got in for a number of these universities, and there's a genuine anxiety, and we would love to take more too, but the basic requirements are tough. Right? And I think what you said is very important. All our first years, they're in for a bit of a shock. Right? They are pushed. They are pushed. It's tough. But I think, in the spirit of she mentioned talking honestly, not just special needs in terms of disabilities that they know. A lot of people discover disabilities in college. It's a very tough time. You discover things about yourself. And anxiety and depression is a major part of that, but there are other things too. And I think as educators, we'll be failing our students if we didn't look at this and say, okay, we've got to figure out how they can navigate. Because this doesn't mean they can't be brilliant scientists, and often it comes along with brilliant researchers. I mean, it's a very close relationship between creativity and other kinds of tensions too. Right? And so as universities, we're really trying to address this. How do we think about this? What kind of support we need to build for them, and that sort of thing as well. So I think it's both things they come with and they know, but also things they discover while they're
Like you said, and Ashoka has got a center for well-being. We've got a center for individual and group experiences. We've got a center for learning and
as counselors, we really want to encourage Indian universities to be like the university for the students to go to, and I consciously try to make an effort to make them apply to at least one Indian university so that they explore, they can go wherever. But the most difficult and challenging thing for us as a counselor is to reach that university. Sometimes we keep writing to people, except Ashoka, I don't feel they are really good in terms of contacting us. But like for example, I have a student in India, but I don't know who is the one contact in case I have another student who wants to go there.
These are ones that will call me back, but you're right. I have a hard
I
time.
know about the university because they don't do school outreaches and the students come from the schools.
So a lot of these are starting to, and that's the other thing that I really like about them. I mean, they brought us up to visit the ones that are
How
here.
did you manage? Now that's a decisive conversation.
so, yeah.
Many Indian universities together.
We came up and visited these 4, and they worked together, the 4 that are in Delhi. They worked together to bring us up here and showed us around. Like the 4 that are here, Obijindal, Shivnadar, we did initiate it. There were maybe 10 of us from Mumbai that came up. But honestly, they were fantastic. So if you ever, I mean, I have my card, if you ever need contact information, but you're right, it's frustrating because like traditionally Indian universities didn't do outreach. And so I'm trying to learn. You want to talk about you trying to learn, like how about me? And I'm dying, yeah, so I can feel your pain.
I mean, Ashoka's here, of course, and SMU.
The universities are doing good work. The universities are doing good work.
No, so actually half of our students are here. The Delhi kids are like, here we have one Tamil and Telugu only. Because so that like we actually have a very large number.
Let me tell you, the initiative the Bombay Council is amazing. But at my end, literally I reach out to the university and say, I want to come and see, I want to come and see, and I just do it. That's the only way one can do it. Can't expect, I mean, to really expect somebody to then this contest is not happening. I did it with May, I did it with Simhasana, I just do it.
So if the universities are doing excellent work, don't they need to integrate backwards? I mean, as a school, we are at this level, probably some schools are at the top level, but the masses are not, and universities are at this level. Don't university needs to invest back into the school, integrate backwards?
It's a very good point. I think it's a very good point. See, ultimately, look, Indian education from preschools and Anganwadi all the way to university is in a state of
95% population is there.
Right? And so one has to think about this. I think you're absolutely right. I think for us as universities, thinking about diversity, thinking about expansion, and I know this is on top of the minds of a lot of our universities. Right? I know I've spoken to people like Ashoka, we're all trying to do this. I think we're not doing well enough clearly. But that's something we should, work towards.
You should heavy in that because 90% of the population lies there.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, just to say, this is something that makes me very excited. My first year batch in sociology, there's a student who comes from a village in Muradabad. And he's come through this Vidya Gyan program, and it's absolutely wonderful having him in class because it completely changes. Like he's, doing amazing work. But a lot of our students from the south, some of them are from small districts. So I think that is the way we have to break it. And like I said, unless we have diverse public and private universities, we aren't going to solve this problem.